So let me just get my sentence out. Alright, I'm going to let Eric do the intro. But before I start, this will be an episode about Christianity. It's very hard to get a non-Christian to sit through a whole hour of a podcast about Christianity. It's hard. But I urge you to listen. Listen just this once. Alright, Eric, go ahead.
Well, thank you.
I meant the audience, not... Oh, Eric, you listen. I meant the audience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, hello. Welcome to our humble lair. He is Harmonti. I am Hardrada. And we are madmen of the Forbidden Zone. Or the cybersphere. Or you know, whichever you prefer. Where we are, the point is, we are unafraid here, wherever we are, to take on the most blustering and contraventional topics of our time. A claim I bet you've never heard anybody else make in this domain. And here's an example of what we mean. About a year ago, Harmonti here made a startling coming out announcement. Well, it was startling to me. He had become a Christian. Now, I've been a dedicated non-believer, what I would call a virtual atheist, since college, which was like 50 years ago. My God, so to speak. But I am intensely interested in religion, in the same way that I'm interested in Wicca and Scientology and the UFO experience and things like that. Not as belief systems that I think there might be something to, but as cultural, psychological phenomena. You follow me? I had the idea of interviewing Harmonti about his newly found religious faith, and he said, Hardrada, I'm in. So, all right, Harm. Very plucky of you. Welcome.
And let me mention real quick, Eric didn't want to be rude, and he thought it was going to be personal to ask me about this stuff, and I thought the same thing. I was like, Eric's an atheist. I don't want to push my Christianity onto him. You know what I mean? Because that's how people should be, you know?
I feel free to do that if you think it's appropriate.
I mean, I'll do my best, to be honest.
You're going to wind up doing that anyway, because you're going to essentially be on the defensive here.
I'll try to... I'll admit, if you hit me with questions about how you could fit 10,000 animals on an ark, I don't have an answer. And real quick is, you know how I said last week, I said left-wingers when they debate right-wingers? It's called word wizardry, where you kind of like dance around topics and you pin them in a question and make them look stupid.
Left-wingers are full of nasty little tricks like that, but conservatives never pull tricks like that.
Well, I don't know. They don't. I don't see them do it as much.
Well,
where they're, I guess,
you're not
what's
paying
that word?
Attention, but
yes, pedantics. Where it's like, you know. So I used to watch clips because YouTube was really an atheist platform in like 2007 to 2012. Yeah, it was mainly just like big atheists. Those were the biggest channels, Amazing Atheist, and I used to watch. These people had like an atheist, what do you call it, public access show, and a Christian would call in, some guy that doesn't even know that much.
The Atheist Experience, I think I've seen that. That's a pretty good show, but you can't say that Christians don't have similar
they have
forums.
Similar shows, but what these Christians would call into the Atheist Experience, they don't know how to debate, and they don't even know much about the Bible.
That's true.
And they would track
usually
them.
Look pretty foolish.
Yeah, and it seems like the atheists would have like their they would bring out the big guns immediately, and they would ask a question and it would contradict.
Yeah, they are. I don't watch them a lot. They are often unnecessarily aggressive.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree with that.
And I think that the reason that atheists are so good at dismantling Christian arguments is because I think for the past couple hundred years we've been in the end times, and a lot of scientific theory has been preached in schools at a young age. It's very easy to make a Christian look bad, but isn't that a big part of religion, is you have to have faith? I've never liked the argument. People always say, well, you notice that God stopped making appearances after the invention of the camera? Well, like, if we did live in a world where God was just kind of showing up whenever he wanted to, hey guys, and then shouting commands to us, I think the world would be a lot different. I don't think that's how it works.
Well, it would undoubtedly be considerably different if God were to make his existence and his presence known to us in some unmistakable way.
Yes.
Hell, presumably everybody would convert on the spot.
And it would take away the purpose of life. And now that people know there's a direct God...
It would certainly take away some of the mystery of life.
Well, if everybody saw there was a direct God in the clouds speaking to us, that would almost take away our free will. Because, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean.
Okay.
And as a student of this disagreement, I see that very thing said a lot by Christians. We'll...
Do they really?
It's
not like I didn't...
It's like, I mean, so, atheists frequently ask, why doesn't God make himself known in some more conspicuous way? I mean, nobody ever really sees him. Nobody ever really hears him. A lot of people think they do, but there's considerable grounds for doubt about that. So why doesn't he? And they always say something like, well, if he did that, it would make it too easy for us.
It would.
It's got to be a matter of faith, and faith entails a certain amount of struggle. You have to struggle against the odds to know God and to retain your faith. And
yes.
Well, we can get into that, and I want to begin with something a little more basic here.
Go ahead.
In any case, Brandon. Mm-hmm. Welcome, and are we addressing each other by our first names?
That's my name.
Okay. Welcome to the Sweatbox. I'm afraid I got the thermostat though, so watch out.
Okay.
I guess my first questions to you would be, what did you convert from exactly, and was there a specific moment or incident or revelation that led you to become a Christian?
Yes. It's very interesting that you brought this up first, because that's the first thing I had on my notes was what turned me into a Christian. It was a very interesting experience. I would say that I was a Christian as a kid. I used to go to Bible studies, but I was a kid. I didn't want to spend my weekends. Me and my sister would just like eat chicken nuggets while the adults talked at the table, and then. When I turned 17, 18, it seems like everybody was atheist because it was like fashionable. A lot of young people are atheists now. So I kind of was like, I was never...
What time frame are we talking about? 70s?
2009.
Oh, that late.
So it's very common. And so I was basically agnostic. I got really into like Albert Camus and nihilism, existentialism. And then I got into like Buddhism, and then I got into Taoism.
You have gone through a spiritual odyssey, as they often say.
Yes. And what's funny is one of my friends became an Orthodox Christian. And this is horrible to say, but I got into Christianity very disingenuously. He was always talking about it, and I liked how calm his demeanor was.
Is this Gus?
Gus, yeah. And he's kind of my spiritual guru almost.
Still.
But I liked his calm demeanor. I like Orthodox Christians. I like the way they think. They all seem very at peace. So there was a couple times I would tell him I was a Christian, and then he would watch our old podcast, and I would say I was agnostic. So I used to think, one day I'll be a Christian. And I thought that meant I'll tell people I'm a Christian and I'll go to church once a year. I thought, I'm not going to really believe it. I'll just say I'm a Christian. And then something really weird happened like 8 months ago where it was like a slow burn. And now I would dare to say that I am a almost radical Christian. Being that we're in the end times. So, does that answer your question?
It certainly does. Thank you. Yeah, well, I guess most non-believers can claim similar spiritual odysseys, and most unbelievers, certainly in America, started out as religious believers because most people are born into religious families and communities, or at least they used to be. I'm not sure what's going on now. But that's something that Mom and Dad drove that into me pretty hard, and
which is really unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate.
Let me fill the audience in. Eric, you had very strict. What kind of Christians? Fundamentalists.
Well, no, that I don't think that word was in use back then, but it was that they were something on that order. They were Missouri Synod Lutherans. Lutherans tend to take their Lutheranism very seriously, and especially Missouri Synod Lutherans. And we were. It was a pretty intense religious experience for me, for kid and everybody I knew. We were herded through all of this indoctrination. We went to church and Sunday school and summer vacation Bible school and family evening devotions and this and that, and even as a
lot of hard work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work, and even as a believer, which I was, I went along with that and took it reasonably seriously. But it seemed a little excessive to me. It got on my nerves sometimes, and that may have set me down a certain path earlier than it.
That is often the case because I thought you were fundamental, but apparently Lutheran is pretty strict, isn't it?
It's very strict. I don't know if it's It's not these days that you wouldn't call what I went through as fundamentalist, because it wasn't quite that hardcore.
So I go to this. I don't really go on this subreddit a lot, but Our Christianity, it's like a Christian forum, and a lot of people will comment and debate Christians on the Christian forum.
That's what it's there for, I assume.
It's not. There are specific forums for just debate a Christian, debate an atheist.
Well,
so these people essentially, I think it's really rude what they do. Like, oh, let me go to our Christian forum and argue with these people and try to, and then you click on their profile and you realize that's all they do, is they troll Christian forums. And they all say the same thing. They say, I had a very strict Christian fundamental or Lutheran upbringing. So I think that's a really bad thing to do to a child, unless you make it fun,
Yeah, well, nowadays there are a lot of churches that are trying to make it fun. Now they're very informal. When I was a kid, nobody would go to church without full business attire, a suit with a tie for the men and so forth. And it was all, very structured and very formal. That's not, people show up now in church dressed any way they want, and there's rock music and things like that.
And I'm kind of against that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because, I've said this before, is that back in the day, it felt like Christianity was more mainstream. It had grips on.
It was very mainstream.
It had more grips on institutions. So in order,
it still does.
Okay, so
that's a separate.
In order to rebel, you would listen to heavy metal and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But now I would argue that now the institutions and the media and the schools are extremely progressive, left wing. So now to rebel, to be a traditionalist conservative, is rebellion. And I believe, and I've said this before, I think a lot of young people, they want order in their life. Like Jordan Peterson became a mega star a couple years ago because he told these kids, clean your room, have order in your life, have confidence, try to be an intellectual. And the youth are starved for that kind of repetition in their lives and order and Christianity.
Structure. They need structure that badly, do they?
Yeah, so this church up the street that I used to go to, and I really liked the pastor because he was funny, and he would talk about
Pastor Lane, Bert Lane.
I don't want to say his name.
Oh, I'm sorry.
People will know.
Okay.
But he, Pastor Randy, I'll cut it out. But he used to talk about comedians and stuff, and he would talk about Christianity and relate it to stuff in the news, and I was like, that's interesting. But they play this horrible Christian, it's called butt rock. Just
butt rock?
Butt rock. 90s grunge.
Can you spell that?
B-U-T-T rock.
It is B-U-T-T rock.
Just very, like, music with no essence to it, no edge. And I don't think we need to be having, like, rock music in churches. I think we need to go back to the more, like, Orthodox churches, man. They're beautiful, aren't they?
Never been to one.
You ever seen one?
I've seen them strictly from the outside.
They're like art. They're inside. It's like freaking art.
Well, yeah. Well, all churches at one time strove to be very, splashy and artful about the construction of their churches, inside and out. Man, that was part of, in a way, that was just part of what eventually struck me as the phoniness, of the superficiality of religion. Was they were trying to impress people and dazzle them with with all this elaborate architecture and artwork and stained glass windows and candelabras and stuff like that. You provide people with an environment like that, as I say, they're trying to awe strike you.
Yes.
And the more they can awe you with all of this visual razzle dazzle, the more compliant you will tend to be. You'll think these people must really have something going here. I don't understand what it is, but look at all this.
Can I counter that?
Decor, of course.
I agree with you that the church, they look like that. But and I wrote this in my notes. You said the word compliant, that churches want to make people compliant. Here's my whole argument. Churches are not the government. They're like self-supported. They depend on donations. They're not an arm of the government unless you're Catholicism, which seems to be... Catholic is just a political thing. I don't know. I'm not trying to offend Catholics. But, like, for me, churches, religions, pastors, Christians, you watch a lot of stuff and you talk about the Bible Belt and the Christians that are up in everybody's business. Yeah, maybe they're guilty of, doing that. Like, you have to conform to what I believe. But I would argue that churches are their own thing, self-supported by money. They're not the government. So, like, I hate people that are compliant sheep too. But I think that Christians are innocent and they choose to believe. And I don't know what that was. And the government, it's not the government.
Well, I used the word compliant, and you made a reflexive connection between that word and the government. The government is not the only authority in our culture that is trying to get people to be compliant. Everybody is part of some little... Well, one term that we started using recently is tribe. Everybody is a member of a tribe, and within these tribes and subcultures, they tend to have their own structures. Most of them do, to some extent or another, with some kind of authority at the top and some kind of compliance from beneath. And that's certainly true of religions. They have to be structured like that, because religions, by their very nature, tend to seek and attain authority over people, and they require a certain amount of compliance. God Himself, if He does exist, is at the very top of all authority structures in the world.
But you get to choose.
You get to choose. You can choose to do anything you want or believe anything you want, because God has given us the precious gift of free will. The only hitch is if you choose not to accept what He wants you to believe, He's going to send you to hell, which kind of sets, to me, that seems to set a very significant limit to free will.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've always thought, so we did an episode on free will versus determinism.
Yeah.
So just in case anybody doesn't know, free will is you get the power to choose to be good or evil. Determinism is when you don't have any choice and everything happens for a reason, blah, blah, blah. I've always thought that maybe the world is like a mixture of the two, You have free will, but everything does happen for a reason.
Yeah, there's no such thing as absolute free will or absolute determinism. Well, a lot of philosophers and many scientists think there is. There is a tendency to believe in determinism among such people for some reason, and in an absolutely deterministic universe, you really do have no choice. Everything that ever happened throughout the history of the universe, starting with the Big Bang, are things that led up to every very small moment and detail in our lives, and which influenced us to make a certain decision to go a certain way. We literally had no choice. I mean, that's a pretty extreme view, and there are, different schools of thought about all of this that are, except maybe some mixture of these two extremes. I believe we have limited free will, and if you were to propose something like that to a real hardcore determinist, they would shower you with contempt.
Yeah.
But that is just a guess.
Well, it's funny you mention the Big Bang, because I don't believe in the Big Bang. Okay. I don't know much about it, but so I heard the other day that the Big Bang theory and evolution theory doesn't mean that a scientist went, wait a minute, what if? You know what I mean?
No.
Like a scientific theory, people go, oh, that's just a theory. But the definition of I can theorize that what's going on is a conspiracy. That's my theory. But a scientific theory means something else. A scientist didn't just go, oh, what if we just exploded into existence? You know what's interesting is I wanted to bring up, and I don't really want to bring this up because I think it's one of the most censored conspiracies on Google, is I've been getting a little into, and you're going to laugh, Flat Earth. I've been getting into it, Eric. It is we can do a whole episode about it.
I thought we did.
But that was back in the crap.
That was back when you...
That was before I woke up.
Yeah, before you woke up, exactly.
I sucked back then. I didn't have any opinions, but we definitely... one thing, I do not believe we did not go to the moon. There's no way we went to the moon. So,
God.
Because...
Well, I didn't realize you'd sunk that far.
Eric, if you looked into it, I think you would.
If I looked into it.
It is... oh my God. But we'll get into that.
Yeah, maybe that'll be an episode for us.
Now that I believe that we didn't go to the moon, now I'm like, yeah, what about the planets out there? All the planets in the galaxy, we just exploded into reality? That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it?
Well, it's mind-boggling, to be sure. It's not an idea that would have occurred to me necessarily if I was starting from scratch, but that's a lot of the things that scientists and that lot propose to us are things that are true or not, are about spans of time and physical processes that are just incomprehensible to us because we just don't experience things on that scale, on scales that large and scales that small, scales on the order of the cosmic and on the order of the subatomic. Mm-hmm. Those are completely foreign to us. We live life as we are privileged to live it, and it's kind of a limited range of experience that we can enjoy.
But here's my point, is that if I don't believe that we went to the moon, yeah. I don't know about the flat earth. I haven't looked into it enough, but I used to struggle. Why would they lie about that? And now it's starting to make sense, is saying that we went to the moon is perhaps one of the most nihilistic, atheist, satanic spells that they cast on the world. Now it's starting to make a lot more sense to me. But real quick, Eric, so I'm trying to kind of go thing to thing. Do you have any things you want to bring up? Because this episode I wanted to get really into detail to why I became a Christian.
Yeah. Well.
Okay. Sorry, I suck at I suck at switching topics over.
Okay.
let me just say firsthand, there are 3 main reasons I became a Christian. And in this podcast, I really want to explain myself, and I hope I come across as genuine, because there is like a deep drive in me now to convert people in my life, and I think I am doing it successfully. A couple people I talked to, they were atheists a couple months ago, and now they're starting to say stuff like, "Oh, I'll pray for you." You know, I'm slowly converting them. Number one, and we've talked.
That's frightening, but go ahead.
Number one, we talked about this before. The music industry, the media, the movies have become overtly satanic.
Overtly satanic.
And if I have any talents, I think I am a very good noticer of patterns. So you take Elvis and the Beatles in the 50s and 60s. When Elvis would shake his hips and when the Beatles would scream before a guitar solo, priests would go, "That's the devil's music. That's devilish." Now look at what they're doing. Look at, what's that guy, Marilyn Manson? It's just so... And I just keep seeing these award ceremonies where these pop stars are dressed up like the devil, and they're dancing with this creepy occult. And we argued about this on the old podcast, and you argued that they do it just to shock. And I argue they're not shocking nobody anymore because most people are atheists, you know?
Most people are atheists.
That's what I tend to think.
Do you know what the statistics actually are?
No, do you?
Yes.
Okay. There are a lot of fake Christians
out
there.
Yeah, a lot of fake Christians there, and probably a lot of fake atheists too. Insofar as, or meaning that they, a lot of people claim to be something, and they may believe that they believe it, but and they really do believe it, but they don't know why. They're very uninformed about. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of atheists out there who just, for them, that's just some kind of a default position because of, I don't know, something influenced
peer
them in
pressure.
That direction.
Yeah.
It isn't usually peer pressure, but, or no, it could be. Mm-hmm. That could be very well be part of it. But you can be a lot of people say that they believe in evolution, but they couldn't pass a basic quiz on it.
Yes.
And we're going to come back to this, I think, but I am interested to see whether or not you can pass a basic quiz on the tenets. No way. Okay.
No, I can't.
So you see where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I don't know much about evolution, but real quick, let me just get through my 3 reasons.
Yeah, sir.
So the music, back in the 70s and 80s, if AC/DC went like this on an album cover, the very traditionalist Christian establishment that is fading now that we're in the end times would flip out. And I would say that they were shocking people. I would argue most young people now, they don't even, they're all, if they're not atheist or agnostic, they don't care. Like if Billie Eilish dresses up like the devil in her music video, or Lil Nas X gives Satan a lap dance, there's not that much outrage anymore. You see it because you focus in on that, So it's just weird that they're not really shocking people anymore, because most people seem to be like left-wing and liberals, I guess. So it's just weird, like, okay, you've had your shock. Now, why there is a downward trajectory of a pattern here that the music industry is becoming so satanic. Beyonce, it's like every music video Beyonce does is satanic. So it's just, that's very strange. And for me, that's almost like a yin and a yang. If the media is this satanic, then for me that almost puts a spotlight on the other side. Hey, the music industry is satanic. Maybe there's some merit to Christianity. Number 2, conspiracies. Anybody who's interested in Christianity, there are 2 channels I recommend you check out. Number 1, Days of Noah. Days is spelled with a Z. This kid is brilliant. I think he has a pulse on what's going on in the world. I think he's way more brilliant then Alex Jones, David Icke, all the big conspiracy guys.
Not much competition there with.
Yeah, that's
with
true.
Alex Jones.
A lot of conspiracy people, they just babble.
I know what you're saying.
And there's this guy named Unplug 'Em, and he talks of they're both black people, and they talk about how Chicago gangs and the Bloods and the Crips and hip hop and all that stuff. They do a lot of research. It's very deep rooted in occultism and Freemasonry. So it comes back to that quote: the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was that he doesn't exist. A lot of the stuff that's happening now, materialism, New Age spirituality, the biggest trick is that it's not satanic. People think, oh, that's not satanic, but it is satanic.
Boy, that's so devious. Yeah,
they
don't miss a trick. And
I don't know how to say this without getting censored, Eric, but the world is heading for a new order that happens to be new. I don't want to say the words in order. You know, the NWO.
You mean
one world government? Eric, you believe that's happening, don't you?
That we're moving toward a one world government?
Yes.
No.
You said last week that I said we're heading towards global communism, and you agreed.
Well, I have no recollection of that.
Okay.
A new world. Look, I think a new world government is out of the question. Try to conceive of some kind of authority centralized somewhere that has absolute power over the entire world. Basically, something would have to happen that would make people accept that authority, surrender to it.
What about a global pandemic?
Oh, wait a minute.
Okay.
What's that got? I mean, I was on a track here, and
go on.
The point is that people are so fractious, even within. We're divided. There's like 1,000 different countries in the world today, each with its own central authority, and most of those central authorities are very wobbly in their authority. There's a lot of dissension and dissatisfaction among their subjects. Countries, large and small, the United States, for example, has a central authority, but it can barely get control of its own self, even its own borders. There's so much contentiousness in the world. Nobody is going to accept a one world authority. It's just impossible.
This is what I would argue is one really eerie thing that's happening in a post-2020 world, which, by the way, that's me and Eric's code word to get around saying certain things because we don't want to get censored, is that a lot of countries, a lot of big, powerful countries, seem to be doing the same thing in lockstep. France, Ireland, the UK, America. We're doing a lot of the same things. Even China. I think not too long ago, America and the UK, they announced like a green, kind of like a green new climate deal. And then China did all at the same time. So what's very eerie about a post-2020 world is that a lot of countries are doing the same thing. I would argue that America, we have the most freedom right now. It's going very slow. But in the UK and Canada, you can't leave your house at night unless you're walking your dog. This creepy stuff that we really...
It's just as a correction. Excuse me, but Boris Johnson, just a little while ago, the Prime Minister, recently lifted all restrictions. He threw it wide open. You can do what you want. The era of lockdowns or whatever was going on in Britain is over.
They're coming back.
Coming back to the restrictions?
This is never going to end. People keep thinking that we're going to get our freedom back. It's not going to happen. Like I said, I noticed patterns. The U.S. is going to start shutting down again soon.
It might.
The U.K. I can't go into detail, but you just got to believe
because we'll get censored?
That's the worst thing about having a podcast on YouTube, Eric, is there are so many words I can't say.
Oh, I guess there must be.
That's why I say a post-2020 world. But Canada is like nightmarish right now. They are being so bold with like arresting people. They just passed a law to completely censor the internet. Jen Psaki just said the other day that we want to ban you on all platforms for misinformation. It's getting really creepy and people aren't waking up. And I think that's because people like me, who tend to be like conspiracy theorists with some right values, but I'm mainly kind of libertarian, and then progressive liberal leftists, I think that we have different brains and we notice different things. I think I have a more analytical brain, and I think you have a more... You need evidence, and I think you have more trust in the government or something. I don't know.
Well, I guess I have more trust in the government than you do, but I would use... You mentioned the word analytical a moment ago in connection with your... That's a word I always use on myself.
Yeah,
I consider myself to be intensely analytical.
You are very...
Neurotically analytical.
I think I might have used the wrong word for me. I'm more of a... philosophical, and you're more analytical. But so my point
those could be the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm more of a bigger picture. I look at things big picture, and I don't focus on the details. And I'll admit, it makes me look stupid on this podcast because I have a lot of blind faith in my theories and all that. But would you say, Eric, that what's happening in the world right now could likely lead into a one-world globalist thing? I think it is. I think
it's out of the question.
Because fear is a very easy way to control people. And not only that, but combined disasters. Like climate change, man. I keep seeing footage of flooding and all that. Flooding and fires.
Yeah.
I never denied climate change. I just said that they're going to use climate change to be tyrannical. So... the Bible predicted that we would go under a one-world system, and I think it's clearly happening. So that's number 2. I'm sorry, Eric, I'm taking a long time on this section. Number 3 is I've been to hell in my dreams, and I smoked...
In your dreams. That's where I would expect hell to be, all right.
Well, I'll tell you what. I could tell this story later on in the podcast. There was a drug that came out a few years ago called Spice. It was like gas station weed.
I kind of remember that.
I smoked that one time, and I went to Dante's Inferno.
Went to hell and back.
Yeah, I could tell that later. But anyway, I just wanted to get those 3 reasons out of the way. So what do you think, Eric? What do you think of that?
Boy, that's a lot to deal with. It might be easier if I could have been able to comment after each one of those. You were absolutely within your rights to do it that way. I mean, if I was a real pro at this, I'd be able to keep all of that internalized and structured.
But you know what we do a lot, Eric, is we're 40 minutes in already, and like I haven't even gotten to my second note, and I have like 50. So we get into the flow of talking. But then, once we're an hour and 30 minutes in, I realize we didn't go through any of it.
Well, that happens every time.
That's the hard part about having a podcast. But anyway.
Well, I think all of the... I mean, No, I don't see any way that the world can evolve into a one-world government, a single unifying authority. I think... As I say, people are just too contentious for that. They can't even agree. There are bitter disagreements even within tribes, let alone nations. Mm-hmm. So that's out. Forget that. As you say, the world is becoming more satanic, and you didn't go so far as to say this in this episode, but you really believe that Satan is real, and then he's behind this.
Yep.
Well,
the devil is the prince of this world.
The prince of this world. Well, maybe, but it's cultures evolve just like organisms do. Religions evolve. The world is in a constant state of flux, and it changes, and sometimes and goes in very surprising directions. And I don't know if this is true on every planet where there is intelligent life, but cultures tend to be, our culture, led by Western culture, has tended to become ever more flashy and showy, and there are because there are so many different ways of expressing, people's ideas, and the philosophies tend to evolve to a state where they become ever more extreme. And especially among authority, there almost seems like there is a competition between different subcultures and the authorities within these subcultures to come up with ever nuttier and more extreme levels to take this belief, and because they become intoxicated with their own righteousness, and they become thoroughly irrational. I think it was natural for rock stars to tend to go in the direction of Satanism, or at least ostensible Satanism. I don't think very many rock stars have actually come out as Satan believing or Satan worshiping people, have they?
I mean,
I know that you look at them, you look at the way they dress, you look at their videos, and it looks very satanic to me too. Yeah, I suggest to you that it's phony. It's all phony. They're just trying to get attention, like little kids. Everybody wants attention,
but they're not getting the attention anymore.
Because
there's not outrage anymore.
Well, there is outrage among Christians about that.
Yeah, but Christians don't have a hold over the mainstream media institutions. They in schools, and it's like I could understand, like, back in the 90s, Marilyn Manson went way over the top. He was creepy, satanic, and back then it was like, yeah, the church is flipped out. But now it's like, okay, so Beyonce, every music video has to do, it's not secular, it is religious, she's mocking religion, and they all tend to be doing it. And they're not even all direct about it. Rap music and hip-hop and pop are very materialistic, obsessed with fame. So not only are they being directly, like, upside-down crosses, but it is very sinful, like, oh, look at all my money. Yeah, I got money, fame, bitches. And it's like, for me, I have noticed the slow decay. It's been very slow. And now it's like, you know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And it's stuff that is, it seems like it's almost inevitable in any kind of complex social and cultural structure like the ones human beings live in. It seems like it's natural for people to become more extreme and more flashy and ostentatious about what they do, especially cultural icons like rock stars. And this happens in a way that disgusts even me. I find all of that repellent. But that's part of the whole idea. I mean, that's what they strive to do, because that's the way they try to stand out from the clutter. They seem to be completely unaware that everybody else out there in the clutter is doing the same thing. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to stand out from it. But none of that suggests to me that Satan is real just because people are going crazy. I think there are perfectly natural psychological explanations for the way people are behaving these days.
Well, don't they call Lucifer the Prince of the Airwaves too?
Oh, they call him all kinds of things. He himself has said, well, I go by so many different names.
Well, this is another interesting thing. So I keep saying slow burn into decay. And I've
it's not that slow anymore.
That's another big thing. And my uncle is a very big Christian, and he made a really good point the other day. And I have to preface this. I thought this was a good analogy. Did you ever see the movie Requiem for a Dream?
No.
It was about these heroin addicts that get worse and worse and worse. It's a really depressing movie.
Yeah.
But Darren Aronofsky, he's the director. I don't know if he made the movie Pi. Okay. Well, anyway, one thing that I thought was interesting about the movie Requiem for a Dream is the director did this neat little trick. As the movie goes deeper and deeper, the scenes start getting shorter and shorter until at the end, so these people start doing heroin, and the movie is a nightmare. It's so depressing. And by the end of the movie, so it's following 3 to 4 characters, and it's showing their lives. At the end of the movie, their scenes start getting shorter and shorter until the coup de grace ending of the movie is just like flash, 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 until the end of the movie is like boom, 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 boom. So it's like a slow decay, and it's getting faster and faster and worse and worse. And my uncle made a good point. He said, 100 years ago, there would be like a world war every 30, 40 years, like big, crazy events. And he's like, you notice that the chaos and the insanity, it's starting to be closer and closer. Combined disasters. And I thought that was really interesting because we're in the end times. That now it's like, oh, there's a hurricane, there's a flood, there's wildfires, there's riots, there's evil dictator crap, assassinations. All this stuff is starting to happen closer and closer. And it's like the slow boiling frog theory, that you can't throw a frog into hot water, he'll jump out. So not only that, but there's this one right-wing guy, and he points out that the progressive left is breaking down, I guess, societal rules one by one,
Well, that...
And it's getting to the point where it's going to be like children sex and animals, bestiality. Some of these kids are changing their species. They're cats now. They're trans cats. Well,
everybody wants attention.
Well, he points out that like all the traditionalist Christian moral norms are slowly being broken down, and now they're getting broken down quicker. And what's funny, and I thought this the other day, climate change because of carbon and gas and all that, what if it's the end times and they're just, what is that called? They're putting the wool over our eyes, Eric. That what if it's Revelations and they're just blaming climate change? Anyway, that was a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
Do you have any? Am I making some good points?
Well, no. I mean, when events around the world tend to descend ever deeper and deeper into madness, which we undeniably are, although it may just seem that way to us because these are the times in which we are living currently. People have tended to think in terms like that throughout our history, and Jesus himself prophesied the end of the world within the lifetime of his listeners. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nobody, even C.S. Lewis, who you may have heard of, was admitted that he couldn't think of any constructive spin to put on that. It seems pretty straightforward. Volumes have been written about it by Christians trying to explain it or explain it away, and nobody's done it satisfactorily. It's natural for people to think that, in religious societies, for example, that religious cultures, that the end times are coming. And a lot of them predict it. Islam predicts it. Judaism predicts it. Mm-hmm. And even Hinduism predicts it.
My mom said that some end times prophecy about Israel, the Bible got it down to the exact date.
Oh, they all say that. You need to look into that more deeply, and we could do an episode on that alone. Mm-hmm. And I have looked into that, mm-hmm. and when you really get into the details of things like that, it's mind-boggling. It's so complicated, and it involves a pretty intensive study of the prophecy itself and of the ancient history that produced it, and the current times that these prophecies allegedly prophesy. Mm-hmm. They don't work out that neatly.
Okay.
In fact, some of them are pretty far off and clearly conflict. A lot of the prophecy that these prophecies talk about tends to do with are grounded in some way into
Israel.
Things that are going on at that time. And when they talk about some historical events in the Old Testament, in these prophecies, they conflict with other accounts that we have of the events at that time.
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's. I saw a Vox video. Vox, they're very left wing, like YouTube channel journalists. They made a video called "Governments Literally Enact Policy and Make Decisions Based Off of End Times Prophecy." Like a lot of this Trump stuff going on with Israel and Palestine. Isn't it just weird that all this weird stuff is going on with Israel? I don't know the details, but it's just weird.
How do you know it's weird if you don't know that? What's weird? Why do you use that particular term in connection with what's going on in Israel? I mean, it's weird, all right, but what are you getting at with it?
I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of prophecy, Old Testament prophecy, that is now interpreted as referring to modern day Israel. And there's a prophecy what seems like a prophecy in the Old Testament about the Jews returning to Israel from around the world.
Yes. And you know
I forget what
my mom said? She said, in the end times, a lot of people are going to hate the Jews. And I'll tell you what, Eric, anti-Semitism is on the rise.
Anti-Semitism is definitely on the rise.
You know why that is? It's because the media is really bad right now and it's gaslighting us. So I think the more bold and courageous the media gets, the more people go, media, Jews, media, Jews. They make the connection, I don't know about any of that.
Yeah.
But,
well, maybe you should acquaint yourself with it a little better.
I'll try. I'm reading the Bible slowly.
I was going to ask if you were reading the Bible.
I've read Psalms. I really like Psalms.
They're clever.
I like the Book of John.
They're like these little, these little postcard aphorisms that people put on their refrigerators, but they don't get you anywhere.
You know what Gus said to me? He made a really good point. He said, the Bible has remained true for however many, thousands of years. Like, he made a good point that some tyrannical dictator could have taken the Bible and then changed it to make him look, great. But
that's always possible.
But he made a really good point. He said the Bible always returns to the original gospel. And I was like, that's fucking true.
Wait a minute. Do you even know what he meant by that? Did he offer an example of what he meant by that?
He did have an example. He said that this Orthodox... I don't know the words that well. There was an Orthodox saint who took the Word of God and then he started changing it to make him look like he was like a prophet. And I could see a lot of people using the gospel to make themselves the holy king. And he said that guy reigned for a long time, years, and then it went back to the original gospel. So this tyrant, I don't know.
Well, did you know that nobody knows who the authors of the Bible were? The Bible is this compilation of sacred writings from a period that were written over a period of about 1,500 years. Virtually everyone who had some hand in this is unknown to us by name or by biographical detail. We know nothing about these people. Whatever they did, they wrote this shit down, and it was a long time ago. And what tends to happen to records like that is that they get adjusted, shall we say, over time by subsequent scribes and authorities. And this is something that definitely and almost certainly happened to all sacred writings, including the writings that we know as the Bible. They were they as I say, a polite way of putting it is they are adapted. They're adapted to the times and to the evolving views of the people in charge of this process. And there's no way of knowing. There really is no way of knowing who the adapters were either, or what. We can't be sure what their motivations were.
But they were very consistent. Like the Word of God. Okay, say back when the Bible was being written, say some other like cult of personality Joseph Smith type of guy was like, I'm gonna create a religion. It's called the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and he made this weird abstract religion that makes him a god. Like, I could imagine over a period of 1,000 years, his original book would become so convoluted and twisted, like history being rewritten, and it's, all I'm saying is my friend made a very good point that the Word of God has stayed consistent, and I thought that was a good argument. Real quick.
I think it is ludicrous, but...
Give me 1 second, I gotta piss real quick. Sorry. Okay, I'm back. So you think it's ludicrous, Eric?
Well, I don't even know what he means by that. I'm sure Gus could go on for hours explaining what he means by that. But but it made a real impression on you, and you're struggling to explain what you understand that to mean.
Yeah, because
he says the Word of God has remained consistent. What does that even mean? Look, the Word of God, the so-called Word of God, is something that originated, as I say, thousands of years ago, and it was written. Of course, there were in the days before the printing press and the word processor, and it was written on perishable materials like sheepskins, and so periodically it had to be rewritten. People had to copy it by hand.
But couldn't people have abused that?
That's my point. Of course they could, and not only could they have, they almost certainly did.
Well,
that's why the Word of God has not remained consistent necessarily.
That's a good point. I watched this one Christian guy, and he said the other day that he thinks the Book of Enoch was like maybe some satanic people. I don't know. Because some atheists point out that there's contradicting parts of the Bible. What if it was because some tyrant assholes kept trying to change it?
Well, there's all kinds of reasons why that would have happened, but the point is it happened. And how could it happen to the Word of God? Now, they say the Bible is divinely inspired. Now, what does that mean? It means that God moved the people who wrote this stuff down to write what he wanted them to write. He wanted to convey to them and through them to us what his will is, what his plan is, how he feels about us and how we're supposed to feel about him and all that other stuff. Why would that change? If he divinely inspired people to write it in the first place, why would he tolerate changes being made to it later by subsequent scribes?
Well, isn't that a part of the game? Like that almost
yes, of course it's part of the game.
That ties back into the whole why hasn't God come back argument. Like, wouldn't he have smite? But I don't think it works that way, Eric.
Well, obviously it doesn't, but why?
See, I don't know, because I don't know all that much yet. I'm slowly learning, Eric. Slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, all right, let me ask you this. When you press a lot of Christians with questions like this, they fall back. Eventually, they most of them fall back on the fundamentals, what they call the fundamentals, which is one of which is the Bible, which is the inerrant Word of God. Okay, why do you believe that? That's the most basic, one of the most basic things in Christian doctrine is that the Bible is the inspired and inerrant Word of God. Why do you believe that?
Well, the guy that wrote the Bible.
The guys.
Yeah, the guys. I don't know. I thought what they said was brilliant. You know. I see. That's the thing. I'm not like a Christian of 50 years who knows all this stuff yet. So for me, there is a lot of faith. And
a lot of faith.
This is turning into a debate.
That's the most basic thing of all, faith. Which to me is just a synonym for gullibility, credulousness. You drop all of your guards. You drop all of your capacity for rational or critical thought.
Mm-hmm. Well,
you just accept.
My version of critical is different than yours, though.
I guess.
For me, like I said, a lot of the revelation stuff, it seems to be happening. I don't know. So this is. Let me just try to make a good point, because you got to remember, Eric, I don't know all that much. I'm very new. So this is one thing that I noticed. A lot of people, they don't believe. A lot of people I know, they don't believe in God, but they believe in the devil and they believe in demons.
Well, that's pretty strange too.
Well, what's interesting is anybody that's been like a drug addict or like a gambling addict, porn addict, one thing I have noticed that whatever it is your sin is, say you're a heroin addict, is you realize that it always ends in emptiness. If you chase greed or the 7 deadly sins, and I've said this before, but I was a drug addict for a long time in my youth, and you start to realize that, like, when you let your life become consumed by sin, you become like an empty, hollow shell of a person. And you ever notice that heroin addicts, they all look alike, like their bones.
Yep.
They almost start to look devilish and
they look very ill.
And ill. So basically, it's very interesting to me that the decision to not steal money from a wallet you just found, there's like this consciousness in you that's like, you know, that's not a good thing to do. If the world ran that way, if everybody just stole from each other and all that crap, the world would be chaos. So Christianity and choosing to not sin and to be good over evil has indirectly caused society to bloom.
Okay.
I think everywhere Christianity goes, the world prospers.
Right. What makes you think that Christianity uniquely has decided what's right and wrong, moral and immoral? All societies have some kind of creed of ethics and morality that most people within that culture abide by to some extent. And just it is a lot of cultures and societies have conflicting views about what's consistent. I mean, what's objective objective truth.
Objective morality.
Christians like to call it, objective morality. Okay, yes. What is objective morality? How does that differ from ordinary morality? In the Christian view, Christians use that term a lot. Apologists. Objective morality. What they mean by it is the morality that has been delivered to us through various prophets and biblical authors from God. Mm-hmm. God is what makes it objective.
Yes, I believe that.
Okay, I know you do.
I think that's one of the strongest Christian.
All right, but in my view, there's really no such thing as objective morality, because this is really pretty murky and opaque, I know, but since there's such sharp difference of opinion between cultures and eras and epochs about what is moral and what isn't, then that in itself indicates that morality is extremely subjective. That's virtually what the meaning of subjective is in this context. Now, if there was some original morality that was handed to us by God, and we're all supposed to, let's go back further than that. You know, how long? What is your understanding of how long there have been human beings? Let's say Homo sapiens.
I don't know.
Okay, well,
Some people
we
say
have to
10 billion years or whatever.
well, no, according to the science, the anthropological sciences, and you may or may not accept this, and they do a lot of guessing, but they do it based on the best evidence that they can accrue and apply all of the systems to. Homo sapiens is thought to have first evolved or appeared about 100,000 years ago. Now, or maybe even 200,000 years ago, something like that. Now, throughout most of that time, we were in the Stone Age, essentially. Civilization didn't begin until about 5,000 years ago. Civilization being defined as the point at which we had writing and agriculture, and we stopped being hunter-gatherers, but settled down in settled communities. And throughout, during that whole we don't know what was going on during the Stone Age, of course, because there are no written records then. But I assume, and I think it's a reasonable assumption, were struggling with issues like ethics and morality.
Yeah.
And what constitutes a good society. Should we do this? Should we do that? Those must have been very vexing problems when we were newly evolved and first started thinking about these things. But it took us thousands of years, and before people even started laying down the law in writing, and then another several thousand years before we got the 10 Commandments, whatever they're supposed to be. People have always grappled with, even in cultures that were pagan. The ancient Greeks struggled with this problem of what is best, what is good, what is moral, what is ethical. And a lot of the answers that they came up with during that whole period were answers that we would think pretty rustic and barbaric, and maybe they were. But that's part of the natural process of evolving civilizations. You have to go through this. And we have gone to every appearance, in my view. It just seems that we've struggled with this entirely on our own. And some views are naturally going to become more prevalent than others as certain authorities get power and sort of impose something on their subjects. And it's all pretty subjective what they come up with. Now, one of the most popular organized set of morals and ethics that we are familiar with in America are Christian ones, and that's the most familiar one throughout the West, because for whatever reason Christianity became the prevailing religious paradigm in the West. Okay, and it's natural for any religion that it gets that kind of plurality or control over a culture. It's going to write its own biography, its own history. It's natural for it to think of itself as having the one true God and the one true set of morals. It's a cultural phenomenon. It's not a theological one. That's my view of it.
Okay, real quick, and I don't know that much about this, but so what we're talking about here, in case anybody doesn't notice, and this is going to be my best attempt at explaining it, objective morality, I think, from what I gather it means, is that in the beginning there was God. God made the commandments and the rules to what was morally okay and what was evil. So objective morality is like a Christian viewpoint that it stems from that. Right? Is that about right? Just without going too deep. Yeah, does that sound okay?
Yeah, I guess.
Because people might not know what we're talking about with all this. So subjective morality is kind of this ambiguous morality that isn't based off of truth, and it's kind of like somebody made a good example before, and I hate talking about this shit. But like in some African tribes, and I think Gus made this argument, in some African tribes, a rite of passage is for like kids to blow off the old tribal guy with the fucking wig and the hat, and so that we know that that's horrible.
What?
And I don't like going into... I hate that topic. Like, so African tribal men would get, like, 4-year-olds to blow them as a rite of passage. I know, it's gross. It's disgusting. I hate talking about shit
Well, I
like
never
that.
heard of that one.
Well, so...
I mean, I know some of the horrible and disgusting things that they were required to do in primitive tribes, sure.
So that's just a good example, is that's okay over there, but now we don't do that. And I think the reason we don't do that, I think the reason the age of consent is 18 is because society has learned that when you do that kind of twisted shit to kids, they grow up fucking broken people.
Exactly. Society has learned through trial and error. That's why we have most of the moral codes that we have.
Well,
We can. It's
right.
so easy for us to attribute that kind of wisdom to God, to whatever God you happen to believe in, and to say, in fact, that God was the author of these rules and these moralities. But it doesn't mean that that's where they actually came from. There are certain moral standards that most civilized cultures can agree on. Most of them have, even in the days going back as far as Nebuchadnezzar and Hammurabi and, deep in Old Testament territory, they had certain legal codes that some articles of which are surprisingly similar to our legal code. You ought to look at the code of Hammurabi sometime. And it's most cultures are going to understand that it's wrong or at least bad to commit murder and to steal. Everybody agrees on that. They may be somewhat... I
just thought of a good counter-argument. Okay, so remember how I said earlier... It's not even an argument. I'm not... But, remember how I said earlier where Christianity goes, society flourishes, and towns are made, and people don't kill each other in the streets. Look at how the West... would you agree the West is the most prosperous, civilized place maybe in history? Right now it is. But then, and I hate to say it, I don't want to sound like an Islamophobe, but in these Middle Eastern countries, they're still like, they don't have plumbing and they're cutting people's heads off for haram.
Yeah.
So, like, that's almost a good example that Christianity is like, oh wow, this really works. Like, all the morality based around it. And then Islam is like, ooh, you're still living in sand houses.
Well.
So I brought that up just to say that I believe, and maybe I believe this because I don't know as much as you about history, but I believe that, like, the laws that we have, like the Constitution and the laws, is it true that they're based off of the Ten Commandments in the Bible?
No.
Okay, Eric. So that's
such an easy thing to say.
That's where we
it's
disagree.
Not true.
But when you debated Gus like a year ago, I thought Gus's objective morality argument, I thought that was really good. Because, like, say we do turn into a one world government. I've heard, and I hate to bring politics into this, but some right-wingers have claimed that progressive left-wingers, the reason they win so many debates is because they don't believe in objective truth. Like, there's a man and a woman. The progressive left-wingers believe that there's no such thing as a gender binary, and that men can have women brains and become women. So once you get into that line of thought, which is subjective, everything becomes muddied, and then society collapses. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah.
I tried to make a good point there. I think I failed. I don't know. Do you know what I mean, though? This has become a debate, Eric.
That was inevitable, wasn't it?
I thought it was going to be...
What else could it have...
I thought it was going to be me, how I got into Christianity.
Well, I think that was the original idea, but just in asking that, it's inevitable for us to... We need to hear you justify why you believe. So you're going to go into things like that.
No, I mean, this is fine. I think this is good.
Yeah, but I don't know what to say to all that, except that you say that Christian culture is superior to Eastern culture and Islamic culture and Hindu culture and Buddhist culture, and on many levels, I agree. I think that the Western tradition is superior to other traditions, mainly because of its capacity to progress, to move past shit like that. Like some of the stuff that they're still consumed by in
well, that's
mostly
a good argument.
in the Islamic regions of the world. Yeah, they're very back. Some countries are some of those Arab countries are wealthy. They have power and influence, and they have structure and governments and laws. But they are mired in things like the purity of people's interpretation of the Quran,
and they advocate violence.
Yes, they do. Well, not all of them do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, every religion, including Christianity, has or has had its radical wing. Mm-hmm. Now, the Christian, I'm unaware of any radical Christian wing that hijacks airplanes and wears suicide vests and things like that. Mm-hmm. But if you look at history, about which I know so much, it's the Christians have slaughtered other cultures and slaughtered each other in numbers that are unimaginable to us today. Believing devoutly in Christianity, Christian doctrines, and being indoctrinated purportedly into Christian morality are just as guilty of murder and mayhem and destruction as anybody else.
That was a big talking point. When I was about 16 to 20, my little atheist period I had, a lot of people would say that they would just boil Christianity down to oh God, yeah, religion has been the cause of all the world's problems and wars. One, I don't even know if I buy that. But then again, I don't even know that much about history. But so you made an argument once. You made a really good point. You said most of the good things that we have today in America was because of like liberals. You remember?
Yes.
And you said that liberals ended slavery. Liberals brought the civil rights movement and got black people.
Gave women the vote.
Gave women the vote. So all those things were good in the short term, but
they're not good anymore.
No,
civil rights is not good anymore.
No. Civil rights is good, and yes, women voting is good. All that stuff is good, but atheism in the long term, I fear, is gonna have disastrous consequences.
Well, I will concede that is a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an advocate for godlessness, as you know, and I think if I were to become the authority in the land, and if I was able to, even if I had that kind of power, the one world government kind of power, I would not. I don't know what you would think I would do. I would not close down the churches and try to force people to become atheists. Mm-hmm. I would be an enlightened despot. I like to think of it. But I know that's not necessarily true of everybody. I mean,
you're a good person, and a lot of atheists are good people. I've noticed that.
Yeah,
but they're progressive. They're progressive people.
Well,
and I think that hasn't even manifested the bad shit yet.
Well, if atheism, for lack of a better word, I mean, just speaking godlessness of whatever kind, if that were to become the predominant spiritual paradigm in a society such as
atheism?
Ours. Yeah, atheism, in the way that Christianity is now, it's entirely possible that it would become as intolerant and judgmental and exclusivist as Christianity is.
It would become an evil beast system.
It would be at the very least be very dogmatic.
Yeah.
In the same way that Christianity is.
Well, look at this. This is a point that I like to make, and I think I made it on the last podcast. Is I always wonder now, is, like the millennial progressives, like live and let live, homosexuality is not a sin, live and let live, which was my attitude as a millennial. Most millennials are like, don't be racist, blah blah blah. But now you look what's happening. And did I showed you that video where all these liberals there's a 4-year-old girl twerking and they're clapping.
Yeah, I saw that.
And now there's like
I wasn't sure what I was looking at there, but
well, for me that's like these are the atheists to me. They're the ones that are progressive.
Well, did you know those people to be atheists?
If they were liberals, they were most likely atheists. If they were left-wingers are mostly atheists. And
no,
we haven't gotten to the point yet. Like right now, we did an episode that like critical race theory, that like white men feel like they're under attack. That's just the prelude to the coming persecution of Christians. That's going to happen. I think that Christians are going to be shot in the streets.
The streets
within the next 10 years. I really believe that.
Within the next 10 years.
But like, and I hate that I always bring this up, but go on YouTube and type in transgender drag queen child Desmond. The kid's name is Desmond. So, like, progressive leftism is leading to like sexualizing children. I saw a TikTok a week ago where this girl, she was a lesbian. She said, we need to take kids to Pride Month. We need to mix kids with kink. So not only do they want kids to be accepting of Pride Month and the Pride flag, they want kids to learn about masturbation and sexuality. That's disgusting. And that is where atheism will lead a society. And I just don't think that we know that yet.
Well, that isn't necessarily... Yeah, you could be right.
Okay.
And all that stuff is appalling to me, too.
Yeah, I know.
We're going way too far with all of this, as we tend to do.
Yeah.
And you know, religions tend to do that, too. They tend to become ever more fundamentalist. But, you know, none of that really has any bearing on whether or not God exists.
Okay.
Or any direct bearing on which religion is the one true religion. It's just, I mean, you can buy and be a subscriber to the tenets of any religion on earth and still buy into some very bizarre ancillary beliefs.
Yes.
And it is true that most of the people that are behind I don't know what you would call this, the extreme gender dysphoria of our society are progressives,
yes.
which is an extreme form of
far
liberalism.
Left progressive.
Yeah, far left progressivism, and I really hope we don't continue down that path, but I'm sure we will. I mean, that, like I say, that's how cultures evolve. They start becoming ever more extreme,
and then they collapse like Rome.
Well, they collapse. They collapse like Rome. Well, you know, Christian. Well, in what way? What is your understanding of why Rome collapsed?
Okay, I hate to say this, but there are two things that I have in mind. In Rome, they were having orgies in the streets. And then two, politicians became too powerful and arrogant, and probably they were like obsessed with money and screwing over the little guy.
Just like they are today.
Just like today. So America, I believe, is going to collapse like Rome. And I'm just trying to make the point that I think that every year, the further we get and closer we get to 2030, 2050, I think society is going to become more atheist, more beast system-y, and I think society is going to collapse. And then I think Revelations is going to happen.
Well, first of all, we're running out of time here,
okay.
I think, but earlier we touched on statistics, and you seem to have the sense that atheism was a huge movement and extremely influential. Do you know what the percentage of the Americans are actual atheists or even just agnostics?
A lot.
It's like about 3%.
I don't believe that.
You don't believe
I don't
it?
believe a lot of statistics.
There are a lot of... No, wait a minute. Now, let me clarify. There are a lot... People are leaving religion in extremely large numbers. At least this is what is being reported in some of the things that I've seen. The churches are collapsing. Christianity is in this vortex, you know. But that doesn't mean that people who leave the churches are becoming atheists necessarily. That doesn't seem to be happening at all. A lot of the people who are leaving conventional Christian churches are becoming increasingly interested in astrology and
that's a sign of the end times to me.
Well, it may be. Because
do you know? Okay, here's another good point. Is that the average modern day person? I like to imagine they're usually left leaning and kind of progressive. They are leaving Christianity because now it's become the norm for the media and the institutions and schools and all that to promote. See, I don't want to sound homophobic, but stuff like that, transgenderism. So all these young people are like, I'm gonna leave because I'm not homophobic and blah 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 blah. So my theory is that liberals create. It seems to be that as humanity evolves, we're going a little inch into the left every time. We're breaking. So now more people are leaving Christianity. And I don't believe in statistics. And I also think that if anything, they're not atheists, but they're agnostic. They're fake Christians that go to church once a year.
Do you go to church?
I don't go to church.
When are you going to start?
I'm trying.
You're trying. Your mother goes to church, doesn't she?
She goes to. She's a Protestant, and I'm not really a Protestant. I'm more of a. I don't even know what I am.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on that too. If you identify with any particular sect or denomination, I think
I
you
really
seem
like
to be
orthodoxy.
What? You're like okay, so you're inclined toward orthodoxy. Can you explain?
I like orthodoxy because my friend pointed out that the word Protestant means that they protested like orthodoxy, and I think that the Protestants are always saying all you have to do is say Lord Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior 5 seconds before you die and you go to heaven.
They also, that's true of all of them.
I mean, I do essentially believe that, but I also think that once you become a Christian, you have to make changes in your life. You have to try to sin less. You have to try to become a better person. Learn as much as you can, and I think orthodoxy seems to be more about that.
Well, I think anybody can do that if they're really interested in doing it and make the effort. You don't have to believe in God to want to strive to become a better person.
Yeah.
That's all, that's all I'm saying. Well,
and I know we're running out of time. Let me just hit a couple beats. You know what Gus said? So, remember Eric a couple years ago, I used to tell you, I'd be like, Eric, I'm such a slob, I'm lazy, I watch YouTube all day. But I would go through these periods where I'd be really productive for a couple weeks, and then I would go back to being a slob.
You were a real ball of fire during those periods.
I'm on week 16 of order in my life and productivity and exercising every morning. And guess what I started doing at the day one on week 1? I started praying every morning. My friend said, isn't that interesting that the moment you start praying, you start making progress in life? And hell yeah, I've made progress. Like, I've worked so hard on this YouTube channel. I've put so much hours of work into it. And I'm like, it's just interesting to me that the moment I start praying and becoming a Christian, that I start to see good results in my life.
Well, if you're taking that as evidence or proof that Christianity is real and
it's not proof. It's just a nice little thing.
Well, okay, whatever it is, I can make the mirror image argument. I started becoming really interested in things and started becoming more why did I say that? Well, more liberal. I was becoming more liberal at the time that I lost my religious faith. But I strove to be a better person. Yeah. I'm still striving to be a better person. I don't have many opportunities to put that to the test because I'm so reclusive. But I am a better person, and I'm curious about things in a way that I was never curious about before.
Yes.
The world seems to have so many more possibilities and alternatives. Not all of them good, but I haven't charted that course. I tried to chart the better course since I lost my religious faith. it can work both ways. That's
absolutely.
All right. So
I thought it was just a little fun.
So
fact.
it's a fun fact, but you may be drawing a little too general a conclusion from it. It's like
we should have my uncle on to do an episode about Revelations.
Yeah,
you know what he said the other day? He said, Brandon...
Is this Barry?
Barry, yeah. He said, Brandon, what are the odds that we are alive during this time, right now? And I've made that argument before. When I was a little, we had Sony Walkmans. Now we have quantum computers and 5G internet. And I'm like, I think we all have a part to play in this, Eric. I don't want to try to... I don't know. I don't know. I want to convert you, bud, but I won't.
No, you won't. I mean, I don't blame you for trying. But.
Okay. So you want to wrap it up, Eric?
Yeah, I think. I mean, we've left obviously a great deal unsaid here because this is an impossible subject to pack into an hour and a half. But we're going to let it go at that for now, and we hope at the very least that we've given everybody who may or be listening to we've given you something to think about.
Yes. And the next time we do a religion episode, let me tell my story about smoking spice and going to hell. It's a good story.
I bet it is.
It was actually a very pivotal moment in my life.
It was also completely hallucinogenic, right?
Well, but I started writing music because of that event, which has led me to where I am now.
Well, that can happen too, with or without God.
Yeah, I agree. All right, fellas, who are we?
Who are we?
Well,
Madmen.
One quick thought, Eric. Is that corny that we call ourselves the Madmen? Like, yeah, we're the Madmen of the cybersphere.
Yes, actually it does.
It sounds a little corny.
Most of these names that you come up with are going to be kind of corny. But
how about, since you know what my channel name is, and try to say it quietly, I don't want anybody to hear it. I don't want anyone in my life to know my channel name. What about the Digital Dystopia podcast?
I take it then that we're not recording this.
We are recording. But I just don't want
then everybody's going to know if we have any listeners.
Strangers online, they're going to know, obviously. They're on the channel. I don't want my family to know about my channel.
Okay,
we'll talk about that another time. All right, Eric, I'm so glad that I finally converted you to Christianity.
Hallelujah!
Have a good day, fellas.